Imagine the British Empire at its height. It controlled India, dominated huge parts of Asia and Africa, and possessed one of the most powerful militaries on Earth. But directly beside British India was a country Britain could never fully conquer: Afghanistan. For almost a century, Britain repeatedly tried to control Afghanistan's direction. It fought 3 Anglo-Afghan wars between 1839 and 1919. Britain could enter Afghanistan, defeat armies, capture cities, and force agreements. But permanent conquest was another story. The answer begins with geography. Afghanistan sits at a strategic crossroads between Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East. For Britain, Afghanistan was not just another neighboring country. It was a buffer. To the north, the Russian Empire was expanding through Central Asia. To the south was British-controlled India. British leaders feared that Russian influence could eventually threaten their most valuable Asian possession. This rivalry became known as the Great Game, and Afghanistan was caught directly in the middle. Britain wanted influence there, but Afghanistan's rulers wanted something Britain could not easily give them: independence. In 1839, Britain launched the First Anglo-Afghan War. British and Indian troops invaded Afghanistan and installed a ruler they believed would be more friendly to British interests. At first, the plan appeared successful. British forces captured Kabul, but controlling a capital was not the same as controlling the country. Resistance grew, and in 1841, an uprising exploded in Kabul. The British position collapsed. Their forces were forced to retreat from Kabul toward Jalalabad in the middle of winter. Thousands of soldiers, camp followers, and civilians entered the dangerous mountain routes. What followed became one of the most famous disasters in British military history. The retreating column was attacked repeatedly. By the time the survivors reached Jalalabad, almost the entire expedition had been destroyed. One British military doctor, William Brydon, became famous as the lone survivor to reach the British position alive. The disaster shocked Britain, but it did not end the story. Britain returned, and decades later, the Great Game intensified. In 1878, the Second Anglo-Afghan War began. This time, Britain achieved greater military success. Afghanistan was forced to accept British control over its foreign affairs. But even then, Britain did not simply turn Afghanistan into another colony. Why? Afghanistan was incredibly difficult to control. Look at the landscape: huge mountain ranges, narrow valleys, high passes, remote villages, and enormous distances between population centers. An invading army could capture a city, but then it had to hold roads, passes, villages, and supply routes, stretching through some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. The mountains changed the rules of war. A large modern army had advantages in artillery, organization, and firepower, but those advantages became harder to use when the enemy refused to fight on open ground. Afghan fighters could disappear into mountains and valleys. They could attack supply lines. They could move through terrain unfamiliar to foreign soldiers, then disappear again. This created a brutal problem for Britain. Winning battles was possible. Making Afghanistan stay conquered was much harder, and geography was only part of the answer. Afghanistan was not simply one unified army waiting for a foreign commander to defeat it. Power was spread among local leaders, tribes, communities, and regional networks. When a foreign army entered the country, resistance could come from many different directions. Defeating one group did not automatically mean defeating everyone, and every military action could create new enemies. This made occupation incredibly expensive. Britain could bring more troops, it could bring artillery, it could capture Kabul, but every additional soldier also required food, ammunition, horses, supplies, roads, and protection. And those supplies had to travel through difficult territory. That meant Afghanistan could turn distance itself into a weapon. Then there was another problem. Britain did not actually need to own Afghanistan. Its main objective was to prevent another empire, especially Russia, from gaining dangerous influence there. This distinction was crucial. Britain wanted a friendly buffer. It did not necessarily need a British Afghanistan. After the Second Anglo-Afghan War, Britain gained strong influence over Afghanistan's external relations, but Afghan rulers still governed the country internally, and eventually the relationship changed again. In 1919, Amanullah Khan became determined to end Britain's remaining influence over Afghan foreign affairs. The Third Anglo-Afghan War followed. It was much shorter than the earlier conflicts, but its political consequences were enormous. That same year, Afghanistan secured recognition of its independence in conducting its foreign relations. Britain had fought Afghanistan repeatedly. It had invaded. It had occupied Kabul. It had won major battles. It had imposed agreements, but it had never transformed Afghanistan into a normal British colony. And that is the key distinction. Britain did not simply lose every battle. It often won battles. The problem was that military victory did not produce permanent political control. Afghanistan's geography made occupation difficult. Its decentralized political structure made resistance difficult to eliminate, and Britain's own strategic goals meant that complete conquest was not always worth the enormous cost. There is also a deeper irony. Afghanistan did not defeat Britain because it possessed a technologically superior military. It survived because its defenders could make foreign military power extremely difficult to convert into lasting control. The British Empire could cross oceans. It could move armies across continents. It could conquer enormous territories. But Afghanistan forced Britain to confront a different kind of problem. How do you permanently control a country where the mountains protect resistance? Local loyalties are powerful, and every captured city creates another long road that must be defended. Britain never found a satisfying answer, and that is why Afghanistan became one of the great exceptions to the British Empire. Not because Britain never entered, not because Britain never won, but because entering Afghanistan was possible, while permanently controlling it was something else entirely. The British eventually left. Afghanistan remained Afghanistan, and the country had once again shown the world that an empire can be powerful enough to win a war, yet still be unable to win the country.